All right, we've got quite a few people rolling in. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for another installment of Lookup Answers. Today, we're tackling subscriber key, best practices, and the keys to success. Jason, advanced slides. Thanks so much. Cool. We're going to start us off with a brief round of intros here for our lovely panel. Very excited to dive right into subscriber key. We're going to overview exactly what that is if you're newer to the platform. Can be kind of a confusing topic, right? Then we'll get into best practices and moving into scaling for change. Sometimes, unfortunately, the decision that you make, right, isn't the greatest for long term. If that's the case, we do have some mitigation strategies that we'll get into as well. And like I mentioned at the top, we'll round that out with some Q&A. Finally, if you're not with us on Slack, why aren't you? Go to our webpage, sign up. We're all there. It's a good time. All right, here's our lovely panel for the day. I'm really excited. We've got some heavy hitters here to speak with you about subscriber key. I am Amanda Turner, moderating the session. Over to you, Cam.
Love it. Thanks, Amanda. G'day all. My name's Cam. I've been doing Marketing Cloud as a user for about 8 or 9 years now. I'll say addict. 8 or 9 years. I'll say addict. Former customer and partner, and now working for Salesforce as a senior solution architect in Marketing Cloud. Jason, over to you.
Awesome. So I'm Jason Court. I'm the CRM technology lead at the Comp Group here in the UK. It's slightly typically rainy weather outside. I've been in the Marketing Cloud space for approaching a decade now, both as an end user and as a consultant, and I've done numbers of migrations both in and out of Marketing Cloud. And pass over to Jason.
I'm the other Jason today. I'm Jason Trout. I'm principal architect at BoldRamp. We're a Marketing Cloud partner. I've also been in the space for 8 or 9 years, the last 7 as a consultant.
Lovely to have you all. Thank you so much. All right, as promised, what is a subscriber key? What are we here talking about? Jason,
all right,
tee us up here.
Yes, I'll start us off. So, at a high level, the subscriber key is just our unique identifier for each subscriber in Marketing Cloud. And I put that very simply. As we alluded to, it can be sometimes confusing, and we can have some very complex discussions around subscriber key. But really, that's all it is. It's the way that we identify our subscribers, and it plays a very critical role in Marketing Cloud to ensure that you can identify your subscribers and really make sense of your data within the platform. It's used to ensure that you're not including duplicate subscribers in your data or your segments for the segments where you don't want subscribers more than once. It's used for critical functionality like honoring unsubscribes and preference management. It allows us to, in queries and imports, whether we're going to add or update records in our data. And overall, your marketing programs would probably be a huge mess without the proper use of a subscriber key, which we'll touch on in some of the later topic areas today. And in Marketing Cloud, the subscriber key can be found in plenty of places. It's native to Email Studio. We can find it in our All Subscribers table, along with the email address and status of a subscriber. It's a required field in our sendable data extensions. But interestingly, it doesn't have to be called the subscriber key in our sendable data extensions. We do have to have a value that represents it. And in the data extension properties, we have a subscriber relationship, and that's where we're going to map that to our all subscribers table with that subscriber key field. And then when we're looking at subscriber level tracking data in Marketing Cloud, and for using data views to query any tracking data, subscriber level tracking data, when we're talking about sends and opens, clicks, bounces, etc., we're using our subscriber key to make sense of that subscriber level data. And the subscriber key can be different from one Marketing Cloud instance to another, depending on clients' requirements and systems that they use. For many of us, or many Marketing Cloud customers, we're also using Salesforce CRM, and we have those two systems connected. And so in that scenario, the subscriber key in Marketing Cloud would be your 18-digit contact ID or lead ID from Salesforce CRM. And then in other instances where a customer doesn't have Salesforce CRM, that subscriber key is going to be some other unique identifier, probably generated from another CRM or another system that holds your customer data. But the subscriber key is not the only unique identifier we're going to find around Marketing Cloud. So we actually have 4 different unique identifiers. So we have our subscriber key, which we talked about. We'll see that in our all subscribers table, in Email Studio, and other places. It is a user-defined value. So we have a choice of what that is. Some choices are better than others. But when we have a subscriber in our all subscribers table in Email Studio, then it is also added to Contact Builder. And in Contact Builder, in our all contacts table, that unique identifier is the contact key. So at that point, the contact key from Contact Builder and the subscriber key in Email Studio are the same value. And that contact key, Contact Builder, allows us to connect our contacts across multiple channels in Marketing Cloud. And then we have our contact ID and subscriber ID. These are system-generated numbers, really only used in the back end. It's not something that I've had to use really ever in my 8 or 9 years in the platform. So it's the actions all with the subscriber key and contact key in Marketing Cloud.
So the IDs in the back end, yeah, you definitely don't want to designate those as a contact key or subscriber key, right? Marketing Cloud's not in the business of assigning those. You're assigning those values, right?
Yes, that is, those are not your contact key or subscriber key within Marketing Cloud. Absolutely.
I've had that question out in the wild before.
Yep. And then just wanted to share a screenshot here where you'll see a couple of these IDs listed in one area. And so this is from a record in all contacts under Contact Builder. So if you see at the very top, we have contact key, right? That's the main unique identifier we're talking about in all contacts and Contact Builder. And then if we look at the bottom here in the green box, we see both a contact ID, which is that system-generated number that we talked about. That is not your contact key or subscriber key. And then we also have a contact key here. And if you notice, this is an 18-digit value starting with 003, meaning this is a contact ID from Salesforce CRM. So this Marketing Cloud instance is connected to Salesforce CRM. And yes, if you're following, I did say contact ID twice with 2 different definitions. We have a contact ID, that's a system-generated value in Marketing Cloud, and then we have a contact ID in Salesforce CRM that becomes our contact key within Marketing Cloud when we are connected to Salesforce CRM. Completely different, just to keep us on our toes in our jobs. And I'll pass it on to the other Jason.
Jason
Court, let's go through some best practices about those IDs.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm now the other Jason. And when we talk about best practices, we probably talk about this in quite a loose sense of the term best practice. If those of you who are at the on the call before we really kicked off, you may have heard some of the conversation around best practice only being best practice if it works for you. And actually, if everyone's doing best practice, you may not all be hitting all of your requirements. And you can think about best practice in 2 kind of ways. There's the business requirements and then there's the technical requirements. And it's really important that you understand your business requirements of your subscriber key before you go ahead and go, yep, that's the one. Because going ahead and going, yep, that's the one with the wrong one can create all kinds of problems. So you really need to take the time before making that decision. So there's a few key bits of research you need to do, which I've highlighted on the left. And then there's a few key things you need to understand in the list on the right. And some of those are operational based. So for example, the role that your subscriber key plays in your person data and the role it plays in your non-person data. And the definitions there are very quite clear in terms of details about a person. So your contact channel addresses, for example, your contact points for a person may be sat within your person data, but your transactions that a person has completed will be your non-person data. So you typically would want to have one row per person, but if someone shops 10 times with you, you probably want to have 10 rows for each of those transactions rather than one bumper row that seems to try and capture it all in one fell swoop. So yeah, be cognizant of some of the cardinality of the way your subscriber key can play out in different scenarios. Obviously, a key one for everybody is how consent is managed. It's all great that Marketing Cloud has unsubscribe capability and it will not send an email to someone who's unsubscribed in Marketing Cloud. But if someone unsubscribes in another system and Marketing Cloud isn't updated with that information in the right way, guess what? You've just emailed someone who's opted out, and that is not a world that anyone wants to be in. It is a lot of fun trying to unpick a scenario like that. As Jason previously said, subscriber key is native for Email Studio. Are your other channels the same? So whether you're using push or SMS or even WhatsApp now, is your key, or is the key value you're going to use the same for all channels? Ideally, you want there to be as few keys representing a person as possible. So how do you choose to manage that? Things like your BI and your analytics and insight functions, if you're looking at person data to see which persons are likely to trade in certain ways or which persons are likely to open emails, whatever it may be, that's really important. We see some of the Einstein stuff that we discussed on the previous lookup answers where, for example, Einstein STO is at an email address level because it's based on the emails that are being received, opened, and engaged with. But if you're doing anything that is more than email, you want to have that same subscriber key, ideally across all of the channels you're contacting people in, so that you can have the right level of granularity in your analysis. And a key one is, do you have any incumbent keys? Like, just because you've got Marketing Cloud doesn't mean you don't already have an attribute that is serving the purpose of subscriber key. If you're not in the Salesforce CRM space, you should investigate what already exists. You don't need to create something new every single time just for the sake of it. If you're using anything like Snowflake or Azure or AWS or Google Cloud Platform, any of the other public cloud type actions that may have the capability of doing this kind of interrogation and data wrangling, you are charged for processing, you are charged for compute, you are charged for storage. If you want to be efficient, if something does the job, don't create another thing to do the job twice, because you just end up confusing everybody. So really understand your business sort of scenario, your business current position, before you go ahead and just pick a key and go, yeah, that will do, because you could end up in a world of pain. If we can move on to the next slide. And when it comes to some of the best practices from a technical side of things, some of this is taken from the documentation. Some of the documentation is contradictory to the way the platform works. So I will lead with that, where it says 254 English characters without special characters. Obviously, you can use an email address field as a subscriber key. Don't do that. Please do not do that for any reason ever. I would 100% recommend you never do that. Salesforce recommends you never do that. It's possible, even though documentation says it's not. Don't do it. Please don't do it. You want a value that can't be changed by users, as in yourselves. You don't want to be able to go and just change a subscriber key arbitrarily. You want this to be something that is a system value. because ideally your system should be managing the entirety of the lineage of your subscribers and the keys that represent them. As mentioned before, use a channel agnostic value if you can. That again goes back to do not use email address as subscriber key. Please do not use email address as subscriber key. I can see Chris in the chat saying, do not use email as subscriber key. Do not. But look for the system that you've got that's got the most, if not all, coverage of your person data. Because if you've got all your person data in one place already, that's probably the place to source your subscriber key from. Obviously, we've mentioned the Salesforce CRM integration and the joys of us saying don't change your keys because it's a bad idea. We know that Salesforce CRM does change your keys if a lead goes and converts and becomes a contact. Be aware of that, because the last thing you want is your leads becoming orphaned and you start sending emails to them thinking they're not engaging with something, or they've got some kind of proposition that you want to raise with them, but they're already opening your emails as contacts. Keep an eye out. Be aware of what's going on with those kinds of migrations. It can be unfun to deal with that. You need to be conscious of unsubscribe management, because what if your lead unsubscribes and your contact doesn't? Again, in the world of pain of, oops, we've emailed someone who's unsubscribed. Happy fun times for everybody. I appreciate it. I'm probably coming across as disaster focused rather than lots of happy good times focused, but it's for the good of everybody to be aware of this and make sure that you're maintaining your database of record. Marketing Cloud is not a database of record. It doesn't serve that purpose. It will never serve that purpose. So if you're doing unsubscribe management, make sure it goes back to your database of record. If you're making changes, they should start in your database of record and end in Marketing Cloud, not start in Marketing Cloud and end in your database of record. You want things to flow down rather than flowing in both directions for ease of management.
Let's actually back up. So we got a question out of the chat. So hi, looking for best practice when using different subscriber keys other than Salesforce ID. So I guess let's hang out here for a moment. If someone doesn't have a key anywhere, right? What do we typically recommend?
So for me, it comes down to your definition of person and definition of subscriber and the system that makes that decision. So if your system of making that decision is, I have an Excel doc and I'm going to assign a value, yeah, if that is your system, then you would make the rules up and you would apply that there. I'm not recommending that as a way of doing this, but you need to look at the systems that assign the keys. So if you have a database, so for example, in the question they're talking about your own external IDs, and okay, so taking Fred's comment around own external ID used for multiple systems for a person, then I would question whether the Marketing Cloud connector is going to add the value that it can add for you, because everything that would trigger from Salesforce CRM will be based on the contact ID or the person contact ID or the lead ID in that system, whereas you would want it to be actioned against your own external ID. So the native capability of Marketing Cloud Connect will be somewhat inhibited. You may be better off looking at integrating through it in a different manner, whether it's through Data Cloud or through even just file transfer or API directly. Tokenized sending could work. There's all kinds of ways you could solve for that. But if your external ID is your common key across all areas of your business, do not sacrifice that for the sake of Salesforce.
Very good. I think that would be, at that point, getting into the idea of storing some foreign key values, right? Does anyone have any thoughts on kind of setting up an architecture like that?
So I've done it a few times, and it really depends on the requirements of the Salesforce CRM on your Marketing Cloud activities. If you don't have the requirement for a thing happened in Service Cloud, therefore a thing has to happen in Marketing Cloud, it may not be worth the effort, because you'd also have to consider if you integrated Service Cloud and CRM with Marketing Cloud, that all of your contact records would have to sync across. You'd be paying to store all of your contact records under their contact ID from CRM, and then paying to store them all under your external ID as contacts registered as subscribers. So there's definitely a cost, efficiency, and value conversation to be had around the external IDs with Salesforce CRM. And I think at that point, I would lean on your external ID as a priority over the contact ID in Salesforce CRM. I don't know if other people have got other opinions on that.
Yeah, that's fair. It goes back to we don't want to store every possible piece of data in Marketing Cloud. It's not built for that.
Yeah.
Anything from you, Trout or Cam?
Nope, I don't think I have anything to add.
Yeah.
I think that was pretty good.
Yep. I'm going straight up. Again, if you're using Salesforce CRM, you're going to have contacts, you're going to have leads, you're going to have users, and those are your three kind of human IDs. If you're using Salesforce in that way, you should probably be using it in that way. If you do have external IDs, good, connect it, relationship the information out, but Salesforce works best when you play by Salesforce's rules in some respect there too. So if you do have a good instance and you are using it properly for your CRM, sometimes just butting the bullet and using that CRM ID is going to save you a lot of pain later on. Yes, you can integrate separately. Yes, you can have a different ID, but just like Jason Court said, you're going to be paying twice the contacts. And you also lose native functionalities. So using the platform how it's made to be used is often a lot easier.
Sure.
We could get into lots of conversation around the way things are supposed to be used and the way they actually work. If we start uncovering that topic, maybe that's one for a follow-up session on the series.
Very good. Yeah, it's a hairy topic, right? There's a lot that you have to weigh when making these decisions.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's move on from here. So that brings us right into scaling for change. What does change look like? What could change within a system that would give you pause with your current key?
Yeah. So I think there's lots of scenarios, and you hear people talking about, oh no, I need to do a subscriber key migration X, Y, Z, and all these different scenarios you can find yourselves in. Some of that is because of decisions that you make that aren't necessarily fit for scale. Some of it are because the business that you're in has changed significantly, and therefore actually you need to be considerate of what's happening elsewhere. So if you're in a business that's just acquired someone, or you've just been acquired and you need to integrate into existing platforms, if you've just added on a whole load of new channels and you need to have a key that works everywhere, if you made that decision that I said don't do and chose the email address of your subscriber key and you started doing SMS, you can't send a text to gmail.com and you need a new key. And also the new database of records. So going back to the comments we were saying before around the external IDs, if your external ID, or if you have your key coming from an external ID and that database of record changes and that key changes, then you may need to be cognizant of how that will impact you and in the Marketing Cloud. So if you're introducing a new channel, is there any common keys between the channels? Is there any common keys necessarily in your source of truth or in that common data source? And actually, do you need to have a common key? For example, if you're doing direct mail from Marketing Cloud and wrangling audiences and putting them through journeys, or wrangling audiences and then shipping a file out to a print house, does it matter if you have a household key and a person key? Because you don't want to send the same letter to 5 people living at the same address. That's a load of excess paper. That's a load of excess spend. You may want to just send it to a person at a house. So you may not need to have a person level view for that channel. And if you're not putting it through Journey Builder, you're not putting it through Email Studio, you're not putting it through the CRM and integrating it that way. It doesn't count as a subscriber, doesn't count as a contact. You don't have to pay for it in any more than you would pay for it for storage. It's not a special type of person or special type of record in the system. So really assess what the lay of the land is in what your current key is, what your future key needs to be. And much like the best practices before, it is take the time to make the decision. Because if you rush and make a bad decision, you end up needing the mitigation things that we'll come on to in a moment. Happy to move on.
Yeah, good tee up for those mitigation strategies. Great. So we'll have Cam take us through those.
Love it. All right. And sorry, Jason, I've got one click per paragraph. So as I scroll through, I'll let you know and we'll go into each step. But yeah, so you find yourself in a position where your subscriber key is no longer fit for purpose. So what do? What can you do? Well, in my opinion, these are the 3 steps you should take before you start to change anything in your instance. Now, step 1 is figuring out what the gap is. You found that there is a problem, it's not fit for purpose, and you want to change something. So what does best practice look like? What do you want it to look like? And where are you now? What's that gap? So as you've already heard, finding out where your data comes from is a great first step. Understanding those relationships, if those keys exist, if those relationships exist, get that information first. Figure out where it's coming from by way of generation, by way of other systems upstream. If those systems are soon to go away in your business, then maybe don't use that key, Figure out where your business is heading. There is no best practice for this. Again, subscriber key is a very Marketing Cloud-centric term. It may be a household ID, maybe a person ID, an account ID. It could be so many things. It depends on the use case you're trying to apply it to. So figure it out and find out how it's populated. And further, you're going to want to change for a reason. There's a reason why your key is not working. What are you not able to do? It's very important to understand what you can't do with your current setup, because that is your opportunity cost base point. If you're going to go on this path, you want to know what your gain is, what you set out to achieve, what you're going to be able to unlock by doing this. And if you don't understand where you're coming from, then quantifying that cost later on is so much harder. So understand what the gap is to start with. Now, step number 2 is assessing the operating conditions that you're in. We are not all on a perfect plane of existence. We all have our own business needs and time constraints and pressures and who knows what else. So understanding what you're operating in is important too. So are there, for example, in your current instance, any critical activities that just cannot stop? They're using all kinds of IDs, in-house, out-of-house, or otherwise, that cannot stop or fail, in which case changing a key is going to be really hard, like changing a tire on a moving car on a highway. You kind of can't stop. It has to keep moving. Are there any other integrations to consider, upstream and downstream? Again, Marketing Cloud is usually the most downstream element of your tech stack, but it could not be. There could be a mail house receiving files after you. So if you change a process, who could that affect after you? And finally, it's not just all about the tech stack and otherwise, but do you have the people in the team who can do this? If you know you've got a problem because you're educated enough in Marketing Cloud, you've been doing this for enough time to know there's a problem, do you have the skills in the team to fix it? Do you have to grow those skills, develop those skills internally, or buy those skills in through a contractor or otherwise? Understanding that's going to really help to, again, weigh out the opportunity cost. What do you have to gain if you take yourself down this path of mitigation? Which brings us to step number 3. You've now decided what the issue is, the gap. You've decided what your operating conditions are. So now is the big decision. Do you repair? Do you tactically triage where you are? Or do you rebuild? Do you actually migrate your subscriber key or otherwise? So again, this is where those 2 previous steps come into effect. You've assessed where you are, you've assessed where you need to be, and you can start to make that decision. There is obviously a cost of time, a cost of resources, a cost of money, a cost of functionality, an opportunity cost, things that you can't do right now because your Marketing Cloud's not set up right. That's going to cost your business too. So understand what that looks like. Once you understand that, again, you can go down that implementation path. Now, one thing to consider on this one is that last bullet point, that complementary project piece. This is what I'm referring to when I say other systems upstream that may be changing, because you're in Marketing Cloud. and never have your blinders on as to what the rest of your business is doing, because there may be a big CRM change coming up. There may be a big acquisition or otherwise coming up. And if you go and change your keys now, you might change them again in 6 months. That's a bit of a waste of time. And likewise, if you know of something coming up in the future, like a big CRM change or business change or Snowflake integration or otherwise, then you could wait for that, because the keys will change anyway. And that way you won't go through those same change management processes of saying, oh, we have to decommission journeys and decommission things because things are changing. Well, the business is making a change. So you're no longer accountable for those changes. You are being forced to change. So it does change the envelope of that project a little bit if you do have other complementary projects and maybe changing that for you. Some big considerations there.
I think we've all come across some of these orgs, right, that have some changing scenarios, changing situations, right? Perhaps another channel's, again, we keep picking on that one, but perhaps another channel has come on. We've got some SMS or mobile push. Like kind of some thoughts from the three of you. You've all been on these projects. Do you like tackling all at once? Maybe you like a option where you approach it in waves or phases? Talk to me about those kind of pros and cons about those projects.
Again, Subscriber Key is a very Marketing Cloud centric ID. It's used for all things inside Marketing Cloud. So when you change a key, or if you intend to change a key, it really only affects Marketing Cloud in its first dimension of impact. Yes, of course, connections and exporting data and otherwise has impacts downstream, but really at a functionality level, the first tier of impact is in Marketing Cloud. Now, some customers do deal with things like engagement rates. They deal with things not just unsubscribes, but information that's stored inside Marketing Cloud, like clicks and opens. They use their own custom retargeting mechanics. And when you start changing subscriber keys, you lose access to all that data. Now, for some customers, not a problem, not their concern. But for others, especially retail, I've seen, those clicks and opens, they're gold. And so all of a sudden, the business could lose that visibility for, 6 months retention on data views. So your business could be compromised in its retargeting for up to 6 months, which has a fiscal impact on the business. So understanding that impact is that big first step.
Yeah. Jason Trout, I see you nodding along. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think it just highlights why it's such an important decision to get right in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. We've talked about, Jason mentioned plenty of times that it's not going to be your email address, right? And you mentioned other channels. Many customers purchase more than they implement on day one, right? They typically are starting with email. They may have purchased Mobile Connect, but maybe that's a phase 2. We know that code acquisition process can take some time as well. So they're not necessarily thinking SMS today, and they're making decisions based on one channel. So it's just really understanding what you're going to utilize in terms of your channels and how that decision can affect it. And, many customers do want to default to an email address. Many email marketing tools, that is the key, right? And so I think, I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts about that specifically as well, because that's, obviously it's not the key that we would like to see utilized, but technically it could be, right? Obviously there's, the number one thing that comes up is, okay, well, what if someone changes their email address? We know we can't change the subscriber key, so that adds some complication. But what happens when a customer uses email address and now they're introducing SMS?
It's a really interesting question, and because you also have the scenario of an email address is not analogous to a person. The amount of people who share email addresses, me and my wife got married last year. We have an email address that is for the wedding and for us to both use, and now that is an email address that we both use, and we get things personalized, sometimes to me, sometimes to her. Yeah. If I unsubscribe from that email that's addressed to her, I have unsubscribed, not my wife. how do you manage that scenario if you're using email address as a subscriber key? And that's where having a value that isn't defined by your users is really important. Because if we both sign up to receive emails about a wedding venue using the same email address, one of us can unsubscribe and the other of us can remain subscribed. We can obviously dedupe by email address in different sending mechanisms, and you don't worry about having to send the same email to the same people or same inbox twice. And you can make winner picking as part of your process. But by having us as one email address in your data, you are halving potentially the opportunity to communicate with this household. So there's commercial reasons to not do it, as well as operationally beneficial reasons to not do it.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's a use case we see in several different industries. I've worked on several higher ed projects. There's potentially a parent-child, parent-parent that have the same email address. Nonprofit, we're talking about donations, etc. It's important to understand at a household level, but also on an individual level who could use the same email address. So it's certainly a use case that's out there.
Higher ed's a good one. I don't know why that didn't come to mind. You got to think of the full life cycle, right? They graduate, they become alumni. You still want to keep in contact, but that email address sometimes goes away, that edu.
Absolutely. And even on the front end, as their prospects, right? It's a Gmail address or whatever. And then right when they start, typically the university only wants to email them via their .edu email address.
Yeah. All right,
I
Cam.
think I've seen 5 accounts for those. It's the prospect, the student, the staff and tutors, the alumni, and the donors.
Yeah.
I think of the 5 personalities we've seen with higher ed, and usually, hopefully, fingers crossed, some are leads, most are contacts, some might be users too, mind you. And you'd hopefully use like a record type ID or similar to denote which ones are which. And in theory, you could be all 5 all at once because you were once a prospect,
Right.
you then graduated your undergrad, you came back for a postgrad, you then also do some lecturing, but you're also a donor and alumni. You could be all the things. And without saying Data Cloud too much on this call, that is kind of when Data Cloud can come in to pick the right key on the key chain to talk to the right person at the right time without splicing and hybriding accounts and things. Ideally, those actually would be 5 different profiles that you could talk to separately, because those are 5 different iterations of me the prospect, me the teacher, me the student.
And then eventually you, the parent, as your child goes to the same university, and you've got, it gets real confusing real quick if you do this in a bad way.
Yeah,
exactly. And how would you feel if you got a prospecting communication to your student email or to your staff email, or a donor comms to your, right? And that's where you can't mess things up. So that kind of MDM, munching it all together and trying to find the most recently used, that doesn't work for that use case, because you do want certain comms to certain emails. So it can get quite tricky. But we'll jump on to the next slide and we'll talk about what you do then want to do if you've chosen to repair or rebuild. So if you are going to repair, this means to triage. So you're effectively saying, look, I'm not going to go and clean slate this. My subscriber key is not great, but I can do some things to mitigate the damage, to increase some functionality, to improve my current operating situation. That could be something as simple as going back to that source data. Sometimes you may have had an acquisition, and so a set of keys are non-conformative to what the rest of your keys are. Again, these are business keys coming in. They're not from Salesforce CRM. They could be something else from an FTP or otherwise. And sometimes you just have some non-conformant keys. A great example I've seen is usually migrating from other email platforms into Marketing Cloud, and they try to use those email platform keys from the other platform. I'm like, no, you've got a user ID internally. Don't use the other email platform's key. Use your user ID. You can change that. Now, it could be as simple as you just contact delete all those non-conformant keys from Marketing Cloud and introduce their correct keys from your data warehouse or otherwise. You haven't done a whole terraforming exercise of subscriber key, but you have kind of triaged it. Now, yes, you do lose some data for those records, of course, for the duration of 6 months, but at least you're not going through a large project to do it. So you can make some quite lean changes. The integration patterns too, where you're bringing data in. It can be as simple as you were doing things poorly in the past, and so you've got some built-up contacts that aren't great, some kind of dirty contact data. You could change that. If you're using a warehouse, Snowflake or otherwise internally, you could start to use that integration path instead. One of the worst ones, my least favorite, is probably lead capture forms and the Facebook capture forms and the IDs that those create, because they're not conformative to anything. So if those have been used, you've got some dirty contacts, in which case you can have those extracted, put into your proper warehouse, generate some real IDs, and then bring them back in. And now they are conformant to the rest of your business. So little triaging things you can do to change it. Now, sometimes too, it's your data extensions. Let's be real here. Your sendable DEs, if you haven't got a good process for that, the whole thing falls apart anyway. So it could be as simple as when you do build that SCV, NCV, we've all used these before, right? Those main sendable data extensions, you kind of build everything off. It could be as simple as you just got to change that a bit, clean that up. I think the record that I've seen so far is 230 fields in a SCV, MCV data extension for sending. Too many fields, far too many fields. So cleaning that up would also improve a lot of things. And again, in that fourth bullet point, it's automations in SQL as well. I did have one customer once who was using the GUID function in SQL to generate a new subscriber key every day. It can be as simple as that. So there are little things you can change that can improve the process. Again, repairing it, not replacing it. But what if you really have got to bite the bullet here? What if you really have gone too far and what you've got is not repairable? There is no coming back and you do have to replace. Well, on this next slide, there's a few things you can do, a few steps you've got access to. There is an official subscriber migration process you can enact. If you talk to your account executive at Salesforce, you can do a subscriber key migration. Now, for describing this as shortly as possible, effectively a data process goes on in the back end of the Marketing Cloud servers. I believe your instance is taken offline temporarily, and your subscriber keys are changed at a data layer in the back end. You provide a list of the old keys, a list of the new keys, and a big data process changes them all in the background. So you can request that to take place. I believe it is a paid engagement, and it does, like I said, take a little bit of time to do. So it does mean your instance is offline temporarily. The benefit is, though, is that you actually get to keep all that contact data. They're just changing the keys in the back end with a whole lot of queries to every single activity in the cloud. So it takes a bit of time, but you do get to keep that data. So again, opportunity cost, depends what you need. Replacing it, like I said, maybe you did have a bad key in the past. You were using a really bad business key. You can change it to a better key. If you are using, per Fred's example, a external ID in your Salesforce CRM, you should be using the 003 contact ID. So just change it over. Again, the risk here is you lose that contact data, but at least you are now conforming to how it should be used traditionally, which means you unlock those native capabilities straight away. Now, if you are making a migration though, and you do have things that can't be turned off, can you build a parallel process? Yes, you have your SCV 1.0 running every day with 230 fields being computed in the half-hour query time every day, and you can keep that going. That's fine. You can build a second one off the side. Can you import those records off the side? Remember, data extension records don't become contacts until you press send. So technically, you're not going to be flooding your contact count until you press send. Additionally, if you do let your account team at Salesforce know, they can usually give you a couple of weeks or otherwise to get your contact count back in check. So if you do duplicate temporarily, raise a hand, let them know that you're making a bit of a migration process, and they can give you a bit of time before they start to check on those counts again. Again, checking with the account executive because they may have some different timing windows and so on. But what about if there's nothing that can be done? Do you just burn it down and start again? I've seen this done too, where you do really just burn it down and start again. You decide, you know what we've got is useless, we can't keep it, we've got to start again. If that's the case, again, do you have the skills internally to do this? And do it quickly. Because if you don't have your system online, then you're not making ROI with Marketing Cloud. So you want to make sure you can do it quickly. So you want to have the skills, the resources, the time provisioned by management in the business to get it done quick. And of course, the absolute pull lever here to execute final move is, do you just re-instance? I've seen this one too, where there's just absolutely no saving it. Especially, I've seen in some cases where customers have multiple partners touching the account over many, many years, And every chef has their 2 cents, more salt here, more sugar there. And at some point, it just does become Frankenstein's monster. And at some point, it may be easier just to re-instance. And there can be some benefits there, particularly if it comes to recontracting as well. There may be some better features to unlock, better things you can start to negotiate with as well. But it could just be because there is nothing worth saving. Now, a key thing here is we talked about subscriber key composition previously. It can really make or break your other integrations with other clouds. Great example is, I believe that Marketing Cloud Personalization loves to use the subscriber key, or can use subscriber key as a URL attribute, which you can collect from the sitemap. Now, yes, the subscriber key can therefore appear in the URL, which you can then capture as part of your sitemap. If you don't have a URL-friendly subscriber key, then you can't do that. Now, there are URL-friendly keys that you can use and those that you can't use. And it's not all English characters too. There is a whole lot of characters that you can't use. For example, the colon and semicolon, the slash, the question mark, the at symbol, the and symbol, equals signs, you can't use those. So if you have any of those in your subscriber key, then you're going to have a lot of problems with MCP later on. So if you do have to delineate or break up your subscriber key, use a URL safe character like an underscore or a hyphen, because those are safe. You see those in URLs all the time. Little things like that can really change your multi-cloud implementation as well. Now there is, again, heaps more use cases to go through, but let's reserve some time. And I think, Amanda, you got some Q&As.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have one come in. If you choose not to use email addresses, subscriber key in Marketing Cloud, how should it be handled when transitioning to MDM? I'm going to assume that MDM means mobile device management.
Or is it master data management?
Master data management. Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
So I guess it depends on what your MDM layer is doing in terms of assigning keys as its process. Yeah, I would not presume an MDM layer would produce an email address as its key, because I would expect most MDMs would have some kind of logic where if I have 2 email addresses, but I have the same name, same date of birth, and I live in the same place, that it would create a single identifier for me with both of the contact points potentially available, and you may pick one. But I would expect the MDM provider would default to a unique key of some form prior to it being pushed into the Marketing Cloud space. I think the key thing there is it goes back to that not having a user-defined key, like let the systems do the hard work. With those of us who are in the Marketing Cloud space and using Salesforce products, we aren't using cheap products. They are expensive for a reason. Let the technology we're paying lots of money for do the hard work that is really inconvenient for people to do. You get a lot of value when you take that approach.
Definitely. And on that MDM front too, be aware that some MDMs will not just generate the best email and best first name and repopulate missing data, but sometimes as more duplicates come in, they may also change that unique ID. So yes, you may have a profile ID or otherwise a warehouse ID. Once a duplicate is there, does that ID change? If it does, don't use that ID, because it means every time a duplicate record comes in, that subscriber's ID is going to change. And it means it's going to come in as a new subscriber key or a new record with 0 previous data, which means for retargeting, otherwise you've lost all that. But it also means your old one's going to be orphaned. And where's that data going? Where's that key living now?
It's a really good call out in that, some MDM platforms work on an ABN process. So whenever a new thing comes in that results in a new outcome, they create a new row. Whereas some will work in, I guess, more of like an ABA, where if a new bit of information comes in, they aggregate up to the earliest that you've got rather than the most recent. So if you've got that, it will depend entirely on the way your MDM works, because you may want to track the lineage of that person back to the very beginning rather than where they currently are for that continuation, that robustness of your retargeting data, the data you might have in all these other systems, you're going to want to have a key that stays steady, even if your MDM creates a new key every time it creates a new match between me now and then I sign up again with a different email address next week. You don't want to have two me's. You want to have the single one of me. Ideally, you want to decide from your business perspective which the right one is. Predominantly, you want to roll back to an absolute point rather than have a point that could change indefinitely. So the first me will always be the first me you saw in your data. The last me may not always be the last me you see in the data. So work out how your MDM process works and decide what makes most sense for you operationally.
Yeah, I'd probably pitch the reverse side of the coin to that commentary too, which is one we actually haven't spoken about yet, but sometimes your subscriber key should also be what makes most sense to the customer. After all, they're the ones who are subscribing, who have signed up to your loyalty, who are enrolling in your university or higher ed. Sometimes that key doesn't have to just be a business-derived key. Obviously, it is business-derived, but it needs to be designed to also make sense to the customer. Because if they are subscribing, joining, loyalty cards or otherwise, it needs to make sense to them. Because when you segment that data and personalize your emails, they're going to get it and read it. And when they try to unsubscribe or reply or engage, and if that's not being captured correctly against that customer, how they interact with your business, then your key isn't working for you. You'd be missing data or misinterpreting data. That's not good for you or for your customers.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That I think potentially the kind of thing like subscriber key is a technical requirement, but that doesn't mean you can't have a customer facing key as well. So for example, your credit card number is potentially a you facing, customer facing identifier. When your credit card expires and you get a new one, that number changes, but your customer number and your subscriber key that underpins all of that should stay the same, but you can still surface a customer friendly value. Obviously, don't put the entirety of your credit card number in the content of an email. That would be a real bad idea. But you can obfuscate and you can show the final 3 digits of a number they may be familiar with or a value they may be familiar with.
Yeah. Very good. That's all we've got for Q&A. Any closing thoughts? Anything that maybe we didn't cover that you'd love to scream from the rooftops?
I know we've covered it, but I'm going to cover it again. Do not use email address as subscriber key. Please never do that to yourself or anybody who's going to ever work in your marketing cloud org. Never use email address as subscriber key. If you take one thing away from this entire session, don't use email address as subscriber key, please.
Or anything that is mutable. So no hybrid first name, last names, no concatenations of mobile number plus first digit of something. No. It needs to be something that is not likely to change in the scope, in the way that your customer deals with you. If it's unlikely to change, that's what you want it to be. So account IDs, loyalty IDs, things that ideally are that one-to-one point with you and how that customer talks with you. If it was a coffee company, don't make it the machine ID because that customer could have multiple machines. One too many, doesn't work. It's some kind of ID that is that person. And if they discontinue their service with you and they sign up again later, that can mean it's a whole new ID or are we continuing on the old ID? You want IDs that are very unlikely to change. And
Interesting
URL
one
safe.
about leaving and rejoining. Very interesting.
Banks
thought.
and loan products and yep.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you so much again to our panelists. Thank you to everyone that showed up today. I appreciate the thoughtful conversation. This was a meaty topic and we could go on perhaps to segue into contact management, right? That might be a good topic for next go around. But I appreciate your time. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, all.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.